I came close to erasing this, not because it felt wrong, but because truth has a way of unsettling you once you let it surface. I've never been someone who thrives on grand speeches or carefully staged moments. I've always trusted the quieter things, the act of showing up, the small decisions that quietly shape a life. And this moment right now feels like one of those decisions. Some feelings don't disappear just because you avoid naming them. Some words don't lose their power just because they remain unsent. And I knew that if I didn't speak now, I'd be carrying the weight of that silence far longer than I could justify. So I didn't erase it. I stayed. And this is me choosing honesty. I lingered here longer than I want to admit. Watching the cursor blink like it was waiting for permission. It wasn't uncertainty about you that kept my hand suspended. It was the fear that comes with saying something real, because once the truth is released, it can't be pulled back. Silence feels safer. Silence lets you keep moving without disturbing the image you've built. It allows you to function, to appear steady. But silence also settles into you. It gathers in quiet spaces. It waits for you when the day slows down. I've learned that ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. Feelings don't fade on a schedule. They wait patiently. They surface when you least expect them, through a song, a memory, an empty space you didn't realize you'd been preserving for someone. That's how this began. Not dramatically, not with clarity or certainty. Just a soft realization that when something meaningful or difficult happened, you were the first person my thoughts reached for. I've never believed love needs to announce itself loudly. I don't think it has to prove its existence through constant declarations or spectacle. I believe in steadiness, in choosing the same person again and again, especially on days that feel ordinary, because ordinary days are where truth lives. When I picture those moments shared, quiet, cooling coffee, laughter that doesn't need an audience. You're already there, as if you've always belonged. To leading this would have been easier. Easier than admitting how deeply you matter. Easier than acknowledging the way knowing you has reshaped parts of me. Easier than saying that somehow, without trying, you've made me more courageous. But easy isn't the same as right. And I've reached a place where comfort no longer feels like the highest goal. There's risk in telling someone the truth. You hand them something delicate and accept that it may not be handled the way you hope. But there's also danger in staying silent. The danger of wondering, years from now, what might have existed if you'd been brave enough to speak. What I feel isn't about possession or expectation. It isn't about asking you to fill something missing. It's about recognition. About seeing who you are and feeling grateful that our paths crossed. Caring for you feels less like a demand and more like an offering, something freely given, without conditions, because it's real. I don't know where these words will land. I don't know what you'll do with them. I only know that keeping them hidden was beginning to feel dishonest. And you deserve more than uncertainty disguised as restraint. You deserve clarity. You deserve to know that you're seen and chosen, even without guarantees. So this is me choosing truth over fear, choosing presence over avoidance, choosing to speak even if my voice isn't perfectly steady, choosing to stay here rather than disappear into assumptions and what ifs. I almost erased this, but some things ask to be spoken not because they're safe, but because they're true. And keeping them inside would have meant pretending that what I feel is smaller than it is, when in fact it's been quietly changing how I understand connection, courage, and what it means to let someone matter. I've come to understand that love rarely arrives with noise. It doesn't demand attention. Most often it slips in unnoticed and settles into your days. That's how it was for me. There wasn't a single defining moment. It unfolded gradually, in the way life felt more balanced with you in it, in how your presence didn't disrupt my world, but somehow aligned with it. I've never trusted intensity that burns quickly. I trust what stays, what repeats itself without growing tired, what remains even when no one is watching. And what I feel for you carries that quiet endurance. It lives in consistency, in how you cross my mind without effort, in how concern for you doesn't switch off when circumstances change. There's a strength in that kind of care that often goes unnoticed because it doesn't look dramatic, it doesn't ask to be seen. It simply persists, it listens, it notices, it shows up when it would be easier not to. It stays even when things feel unclear. It doesn't rely on constant reassurance because it's built on something deeper than impulse. It's built on respect, on patience, on the choice to care without keeping score. I notice it in small ways, in how I remember details you might not realize you've shared, in how I want to protect your peace rather than claim your time, in how your happiness matters to me even when I'm not the source of it. That's when I knew this wasn't about ego or loneliness. It was about genuine regard, about wanting what's best for someone without needing to be central to every outcome. Quiet love doesn't demand space. It creates it. It allows you to exist fully without performance or explanation. It isn't threatened by distance or silence because it understands that connection doesn't vanish the moment things go quiet. It trusts what has been built. And what I feel with you feels constructed, not imagined, shaped slowly through shared moments and unspoken understanding. I don't need love to be flawless. I don't expect it to be easy. What matters to me is commitment in its simplest form, the willingness to remain curious, to choose kindness repeatedly, to keep choosing each other when novelty fades and life becomes heavy and real. That's where quiet persistence matters most. That's where love becomes something practiced, not just felt. There's comfort in knowing love doesn't always rush toward conclusions. Sometimes it walks beside you, sometimes it waits. And that patience isn't weakness. It's strength. It's confidence. It's knowing that what's real doesn't need to force itself forward. When I think about us, I don't imagine constant excitement. I imagine steadiness. I imagine understanding that deepens instead of erodes, a bond that doesn't need explanation to feel valid, one that survives stillness and difficult conversations alike. This feeling never demanded answers before I was ready. It stayed calm. It remained present. The more I tried to ignore it, the clearer it became that its persistence was proof of its truth. It didn't fade when questioned. It adapted. It waited. It endured. I don't believe love should exhaust you. I believe it should anchor you. And what I feel for you feels grounding, something that steadies rather than overwhelms, something that supports who I am instead of competing with it. It allows honesty. It allows stillness. It doesn't ask me to perform. That kind of love doesn't shout. It stays. There's always a moment before an important choice, a pause, where you can still turn back and pretend you never felt the pull. I stayed in that pause too long. It's comfortable there. Silence gives you control. But silence can also become absence. And absence slowly erases things if you let it. Presence isn't about noise. It's about choosing to be fully here even when you're unsure. It's about stepping into the room instead of watching from the doorway. For a long time, I thought staying quiet was respect. That distance equaled care. But I learned that silence can also be fear in disguise. Presence requires courage. It asks you to be affected, to be seen, to risk being known. And that's what I felt with you, clarity, sometimes uncomfortable, often grounding, always real. I don't want distance to speak for me. I don't want hesitation to be mistaken for indifference. I want my actions to reflect what I feel, even when that alignment feels vulnerable. Because presence is the only way something real has a chance to grow. The only way two people truly meet instead of circling each other in quiet restraint. Strength isn't rigidity. Real strength bends. It allows feeling without being consumed by it. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's choosing honesty over concealment. It's trusting yourself enough to stand, even if the outcome isn't what you hoped. And that's the choice I'm making now. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. I didn't plan to say this. Not because it wasn't true, but because truth has a way of rearranging things once you let it out. I've learned that some realizations arrive quietly. They don't ask for attention. They don't interrupt your life. They simply wait, steady and patient, until you're ready to notice them. This is one of those moments. I've never been comfortable with big gestures or carefully rehearsed confessions. I trust what's consistent. I trust what stays. And this is me staying instead of stepping away. There's a particular kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It looks calm on the surface, but it carries weight. It follows you through your day. It settles into the pauses between conversations. It shows up late at night when distractions fade and you're left with yourself. I've lived with that silence long enough to recognize it. It's the silence that forms when something matters and you pretend it doesn't. When you convince yourself that restraint is wisdom when really it's fear. Wearing a calmer face, I kept telling myself there was no urgency. That time would soften what I felt. That clarity would come without me having to do anything uncomfortable. But feelings don't work like that. They don't dissolve because you ignore them. They don't weaken just because you stay quiet. They wait, they adapt. They find subtle ways to remind you they're still there through moments that shouldn't matter but do, through thoughts that return without invitation, through the quiet awareness that someone has become part of the way you move through the world. What caught me off guard wasn't intensity. It was consistency. The way you became part of my internal landscape without announcement. The way my thoughts leaned toward you when something good happened or difficult or ordinary. Especially ordinary. I didn't fall into this suddenly. It didn't feel like falling at all. It felt like recognizing something that had been forming slowly while I was busy convincing myself I was unaffected. I don't believe connection needs to be loud to be real. I don't trust emotions that rush ahead of understanding. I've always believed that what matters most reveals itself in repetition, in who you think of when no one's watching, in who you'd choose to sit beside when there's nothing exciting to distract you. When I picture life stripped of its highlights and low points, when it settles into routine and quiet, you're there, not as an idea, as a presence. And that realization didn't ask for permission. It simply arrived as a comfort in things that grow slowly. They don't demand certainty before they exist. They don't pressure you into conclusions. They allow space. And what I feel for you has always felt spacious, not consuming, not overwhelming, just steady, like something that understands patience. Better than urgency. I didn't feel pulled toward you. I felt aligned. And that difference matters more to me than I can easily explain. I almost convinced myself that not saying anything was the respectful choice, that allowing distance was a way of protecting what existed. But I've come to understand that distance doesn't preserve connection. It suspends it. And suspension isn't the same as care. Care requires presence, even quiet presence. Especially quiet presence. It requires choosing not to disappear when something matters, even if you don't know where it's going. What stopped me from speaking sooner wasn't uncertainty about what I feel. It was the understanding that once you tell the truth, you lose control over how it's received. Silence lets you maintain balance. It lets you keep your footing. Honesty asks you to risk being affected. It asks you to stand without knowing whether the ground will shift. I won't pretend that doesn't matter to me. It does. But I've learned that the cost of protecting yourself from every possible outcome is a life lived at a distance from what's real. I don't experience care as possession. I don't measure connection by intensity or frequency or constant reassurance. For me, it shows up as attention, as remembering, as a steady consideration that doesn't switch off when circumstances change. It's wanting to protect someone's peace rather than insert yourself into it. It's caring about their happiness without needing to be the source of it. Hats when I understood this wasn't about filling space. It was about recognition. Quiet affection doesn't demand explanations. It doesn't compete for importance. It integrates. It becomes part of the rhythm of your days. It respects autonomy. It allows silence without assuming absence. It doesn't panic when things slow down. It trusts what's been built. And what I feel with you feels built layer by layer, moment by moment, through shared understanding rather than dramatic declarations. I don't need perfection. I don't expect certainty. What I value is willingness. The willingness to stay curious, to keep choosing kindness when it would be easier to withdraw, to remain present through the ordinary stretches of life where novelty fades and reality settles in. That's where connection proves itself. Not in moments designed to be remembered, but in moments that don't ask for attention at all. Love, as I understand it, isn't about momentum. It's about direction. It's about walking beside someone without rushing them toward a destination. It's about understanding that patience isn't hesitation, it's trust. Trust that what's real doesn't need to force itself forward. Trust that what's meant to grow will do so at its own pace. When I think about what this could be, I don't imagine constant excitement. I imagine steadiness. I imagine conversations that don't need to impress, silence that doesn't feel empty, understanding that deepens instead of erodes. I imagine choosing each other in ways that don't announce themselves, in loyalty, in attentiveness, in the quiet decision to care again tomorrow without keeping score. This feeling never demanded answers from me. It never pressured me into defining it before I was ready. It stayed present, calm, persistent. And the more I tried to keep it contained, the clearer it became that its endurance was the point. It didn't weaken under scrutiny. It adapted. It remained. I don't believe love should exhaust you. I believe it should anchor you. And what I feel for you feels grounding, like something that steadies rather than consumes. Something that supports who I am instead of competing with it. It allows honesty. It allows stillness. It doesn't ask me to perform or explain myself constantly. That kind of care doesn't need volume. It needs consistency. There's always a moment before you choose presence, a pause where you can still step back and remain untouched. I stayed in that pause longer than I should have. It's comfortable there. Silence gives you control, but control isn't the same as truth. And absence, over time, has a way of erasing things that matter if you let it. Presence isn't about answers. It isn't about demands or expectations. It's about alignment, about allowing what you feel internally to exist externally without distortion, about letting someone know that they matter enough to be acknowledged, even without guarantees. I didn't want distance to speak for me. I didn't want hesitation to be mistaken for indifference. There's a version of strength that avoids exposure, that stays composed, that never allows itself to be seen too clearly. I used to believe that was the safest way to move through the world, but safety can become isolation if you're not careful. And isolation, no matter how calm it looks, keeps you untouched. unchanged. I've learned that real strength isn't rigid. It adapts. It allows itself to feel deeply without losing balance. Vulnerability isn't recklessness. It's choice. It's deciding that honesty matters more than control. It's trusting yourself enough to stand even if the outcome isn't what you hoped. It's knowing that you can be affected and still remain whole. That caring doesn't diminish you. It clarifies you. I'm not offering certainty. I'm not asking for anything in return. I'm offering presence, truth without pressure, care without conditions. What you do with that is yours. The value for me is an alignment in knowing that I didn't reduce something real into something manageable just to avoid discomfort. There's a quiet relief that comes with honesty, even when it doesn't resolve anything immediately, especially then, because truth, once spoken, no longer has to hide. It can breathe. It can exist without being carried like a secret weight. And whatever happens next, I know I won't regret choosing sincerity over distance. Courage doesn't always look confident. Sometimes it looks like steadiness paired with uncertainty. Sometimes it looks like speak ing even when your voice isn't perfectly balanced. Sometimes it looks like letting go of the need to protect yourself from every possible outcome, because the cost of that protection is a life lived one step removed from what matters. This is me stepping forward without rehearsing an exit. Choosing to be present rather than preserved. Choosing to let something real exist in the open. Not because it's safe, but because it's true. And because truth, even when quiet, has a way of reshaping you when you finally allow it to be seen.